Hi, I'm Zeke Freak, and I'm here to eat some crow.
Are you now? You
Yeah,
don't normally do that.
yeah. Not a huge fan of the crow, but it's warranted today. For years now, I've been known as the anti P3 remake guy. I was like, we don't need it. I don't want it. They're not doing it. I was a denier, Kevin. I
You were
denied
the
the existence.
P3R denier.
I was like, nope, that's not happening. You're all crazy. And when the leaks started pouring in, I was still like, there's something else. You're misconstruing this. This is not what it is.
Yeah, this isn't what it is. This is like a re-release of Persona 3 Fest or something. This
Yeah.
is like, another remake anime. This is something else. But
Yeah.
no, it's actually just a fucking remake. The way that everybody said they would do it.
Yeah. So anyway, I just beat that remake that exists now.
Yeah, yeah, not, yeah. 100 hours later.
Not quite. It was more like 80-ish,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. Over the past month, I've played Reload, so I felt like I owed it to, the universe, I guess, to provide my thoughts on Reload since I denied its existence so famously for so long. I've played it, and Kevin has not played it. He's here as a sounding board. He's gonna bounce off me and ask questions and keep me on track.
Yeah, mind you, my main exposure to Persona 3 has been through the movie series, which he showed me.
Yeah, the quadrology, tetralogy, one of the
Tetralogy,
tetralogy.
Yeah.
Which is
Quad
still
is 4.
which is still great. If you haven't seen the movies, I recommend them. One of the better video game adaptations of our time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's where he's coming from. But he's here to act as a soundboard, ask questions, keep me on track, make this a little less rambly. I was originally going to do this in script form, like my True Colors video, but I realized my thoughts are very scrambled, and it would be a whole fucking thing if I did that. And I don't want to take writing time away from Killer Connect right now, so instead you're getting a Psychonauts 2 style rambling video, which will hopefully be less rambly with a Kevin here.
Yeah, my boy is just about to go right the fuck off.
Right. So I guess getting right into it, I suppose, with the big question, is it a good remake? Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's Persona 3 with a number of the additions that later Persona games made to the gameplay. Like, of course it's a good remake.
Yes, I think it's a good remake, but I think more pressingly, I wonder if, I mean, obviously the overall response has been pretty positive, but for the die-hard P3 remake faithful, the people who responded to the surveys religiously, I sometimes wonder if this is the remake they wanted, or if Atlas kind of did it their way as they always do. Because the thing I'll say about this remake, about Reload, is that it's kind of like the opposite of something like Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's no bold new direction here. Like there's no mixing things up just for the sake of it. Atlas's mentality with remaking their back catalog has pretty much always, re-releasing or remaking their back catalog has pretty much always been add, don't change.
Yeah, for better or for worse, this is P3 as your rose-tinted memories
Yeah.
led you to believe.
That's
Like,
that's not saying they've
kind
added,
of the point.
that's not saying they've added nothing or changed nothing. I'll get into that. But what
yeah.
I am saying is that this is essentially the 2006 classic, and I think the primary thing I would say is that if you didn't like it before, you're not gonna like it now, unless you only didn't like it for very shallow reasons, like the graphics are bad, or you hated AI party members or something like that.
Yeah.
Like unless you hated it for like purely aesthetic or mechanical reasons like that, it's essentially the same. It's hard to, I don't want to say it's the same game, but it's kind of the same game. The bones are there. with a lot of quality of life additions, and there is new content, but it's sporadic isn't the word. More interspersed, I suppose. It's like 100. It improves the experience in like 100 small ways, but it doesn't revamp much of anything, and it doesn't break. Well, it makes a few changes that I would say not break canon, but like definitely give a slightly different take on things. But I will get into that as we go. Most of the I would say most of the changes are concentrated in two main areas. One is updates to the combat system, in that they've made it slightly more like P5, but not like entirely. Like it doesn't have like, they didn't just copy and paste the systems. They took what P3 was going for and updated it. So like one thing in the original P3 is that there's 3 different types of physical attacks, for example. I forget the actual names, but it's like slash, bash, and shoot. You know, like pierce, slash, and blunt. I think they actually changed the names from the original to Reload, so I'm not sure what the names are. You know what I mean, though. Yeah, there were 3 different types of physical attacks in P3, and so there are 3 different types of physical attacks in Reload, even though later games got rid of that system. In P4, there's only physical is just all one thing, and in P5, physical is melee and guns. So stuff like that, and they didn't like add the new elements, nuclear or psychic from P5. Like it's all the same stuff, but they did backport. You might be aware of this. In 3 and 4, light and dark spells were only insta-kill chance spells. P5 made. They still have those, but they also have elemental just damage variants of light and dark, and that's carried over here. This has the effect of actually making party members like Ken and Koromaru more useful, because they're not just insta-kill mob cleaners anymore, which is nice. It's nice that they're a bit more versatile than that.
Yeah, it gives them a lot more usefulness outside of just like very specific instances.
Yeah. There's been
which ideally that's what you want in a good RPG, in like a good party-based RPG, is you want to be able to build up each of your party members to be useful in a variety of situations.
Yes, I would definitely say that the usefulness of your party has definitely been evened out here compared to the original. I'll say that much. The original just has some characters that fall off past a point, and some that are just some like Ken that are just a bit too gimmicky to use on the regular, and here it's been smoothed out. There's been a bit of a rebalancing of most things. The Tartarus bosses are different, redesigned slightly. The Tartarus bosses, not the Full Moon Shadows. Those are largely the same.
Yeah.
Aside from a few little things. But it's going for the same thing. It's basically going for a revamped idea of what... I suppose we'll talk about Tartarus itself, which is probably the main thing people who don't like this game didn't like about it, was Tartarus. Tartarus is mostly the same, with some additions. For example, in P5 in Mementos, your party members would have like Mementos dialogue where they'd show up in the top corner and like have little conversations with each other. This game has that for Tartarus. I did find that it's a bit less back and forth, and the reason is because in P5 everyone was chilling out in the van, regardless of who was actually in your active party. Everyone was just chilling out in the Moda van, so everyone was kind of there to converse. Here, the way it works is that you are leading your 3 people through Tartarus, and everyone else is back at the entrance with Fuka. So there's not as many like back and forth conversations. It's more just observations, and if 2 of the people required for it are in your party at the same time, there might be a back and forth. So it's more like that. And lots of Fuka observations. But yeah, they did add that. That keeps things a little fresh, although in my eyes they talk a little too much, like pointing out every every time you roam across a shadow or find the stairs or something like that, someone's going to be like, oh, we found the stairs. Should we head up the stairs later? Gets a little grating. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Also, I don't know. I have to talk to other people to see if they notice this. I am convinced there is a bug where I think having Koromaru in your party triggers more Fuka dialogue than is normal.
It was just to make up the fact that like Koromaru doesn't fucking talk.
Yeah, maybe. I genuinely think that I'll have to talk to other people to see if this is their experience. But if Koromaru is in your party, Fuka will not shut up about whatever he's doing. Koromaru spotted the enemy. Koromaru spotted the teleporter. Koromaru spotted the stairs. He's a good boy, isn't he?
Yes, he's a good boy, and I love you, Fuka. But please shut up.
Yeah. They added shit you can. They added more shit you can break to get random small drop items. But it's got most of the same mechanics, like the dark floors and the greedy shadows and shit like that. But for the most, and obviously it's like the camera perspective is all different, but the the block themes are the same. They didn't like add new block themes or anything. Although some of them are kind of drastic reinterpretations of what the original was going for, because they have to work more in a 3D space as opposed to a top-down one now. But it's,
that's one thing that I did notice about Persona 3 Reload is that like it is a. They changed the fucking perspective of how everything is actually presented, so So I'm assuming they had to alter some shit to fit that.
Yes. And Tartarus is still randomly generated, of course. I was kind of expecting it to be. If there was one aspect of Tartarus, I would have said could have been improved, because I think Proc Gen has come a long way since 2006. Just look at the explosion of the roguelike genre, you know? All those sorts of games. And I thought they could have done something similar to that, but the proc gen for Tartarus is still very basic. It's mostly the same building blocks and pathways and stuff for each zone. The sizes of the floors vary, and the orientation varies, but it's mostly constructed out of the same Lego pieces. They were very faithful in that regard. Go on.
Yeah, to be fair though, from what I know, Persona 3 Reload was like halfway a back burner project for Atlas. It was like halfway a back burner project for Atlas. And they, from what I know, they haven't really utilized prog gen level design in any other game since P3.
No.
So
incorrect.
Oh, really?
Yes, Before's Dungeons were also proc gen, and then Mementos and P5 is also proc gen, and there's probably some non-Persona titles that also use proc gen in some places. But yeah, what I'm getting at is that you are right. It was, as far as I know, kind of a back burner project. From what I've read, this was to get P-Team associated with, accustomed to Unreal Engine, and also to train newer staff. I think I read an interview or something where like over half this game's staff are new people. So, and good job, new people. Yeah. What I'm getting at is that Tartarus is largely the same grind that it was, although I do think it's a bit less grindy because of some quality of life features. But it is effectively the same, despite the change in perspective and a few little additions to make it slightly more lively. Tartarus is Tartarus. So if you hated Tartarus in the original, it's not fundamentally changed here. Which again goes back to my overall point. If something was in the original, it's probably not fundamentally changed here. It might.
Yeah, which is an interesting approach for a remake. Now, I'm not saying that a remake doing that is necessarily a bad thing, but there are elements of P3's original design that could have utilized a larger overall, better overall polish, or just a rework. And it feels like the approach of just remake P3 with some quality of life changes, relatively minor quality of life changes in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure if that's exactly what people really wanted, because from what I've seen, people asking for a Persona 3 remake have been asking for essentially remake Persona 3 in the style of like Persona 4 or Persona 5. And that's not quite what they've done here.
Yeah, I think the same somewhat limited scope the original had is very much intact here. They didn't add like entire new areas or like, you know, new a shitload of new. Okay, I'm going to use the phrase story event. When I say story event, I mean like actually the plot. I don't mean like there's obviously new shit like the linked episodes and some of the shit you can do with your party members in the dorm at night, which I will get into. But in terms of like the fundamental plot, mostly the same. There's a few additions and slight alterations that kind of smooth things out a little bit, and some stuff is shifted around, like sometimes to fit the calendar system. Some stuff might be moved around a day or two, just in terms of when shit happens. Aside from like the most iconic shit, like Shinji still dies October 4th. Sorry. They didn't fundamentally change like major dates like that. Major dates like that. Yeah.
Reacting like I haven't seen the P3 movies already.
Yeah. So there's that. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. God damn it. Yeah, I would say most of the fundamental story additions are two main areas. I would say three main areas. In terms of, I think the one thing Reload did that I appreciate the most is that in the original, I kind of thought, and I want to lay some context here. P3 is my least favorite of the. It's so weird to call them the modern Persona games because it's been 18 fucking years. But
I mean, how the fuck? I mean, there's a very clear delineation between the older era of Persona, which is P1 and P2, and the modern era, which is P3 onward.
Yeah, I'll call it the Hoshino era. Anyway, it's my least favorite of the Hoshino era games. Mostly because it was the first, and I don't want to take away from how seminal of a title it is. You know, obviously, I mean, I like it, I respect it a lot, you know, and I like it a lot. But it's my least favorite of the Hoshino games because it was clearly the first attempt at something ambitious and new for the genre. And you could feel that in the original, and you can feel it here, in ways I'll get into. I know, like I said, all over the place. If I tried to write a script, it would be way too long, and disjointed. So anyway, I would categorize the new story editions in three main areas. One is the link episodes with your male party members, because the original did not have social links with your male party members, and so they've created these, since this game also lacks the female route from P3P, which based Atlas. Thanks for validating me as a hater. It's probably just they didn't want to.
Yeah, that honestly, that's one of the funniest things. Is that one of the things everybody was begging for was please include the FemC route in a remake, and they're just like, nah, we're gonna re-release P3P as fucking is, and you just get Persona 3.
Yeah. Yeah, based actually as a hater of P3P, I am feeling very validated. It was probably just because with the increased amount of voice acting, particularly all of the social links are voiced now. They probably just didn't want to record two different sets of lines for a lot of things.
Yeah, you would have to re-record a lot of those lines because inevitably, talking to the main characters, they refer to the character's gender.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
There's a lot of hymns and that guy and this guy's, stuff like that. So, I get it. But anyway, so, because they don't have that, they flesh out your male party members through these link episodes. I believe all of them get 4 of them, and they're time limited. They're really well done. Some of them reincorporate elements from the, FemC route of P3P. Some stuff is brand new. It's kind of an eclectic mix, and there's link episodes for your male party members and Ryoji. nicely. Ryojis are probably the most reincorporated from from the FemC route. But that stuff is there. It flows in pretty nicely. I should also mention that I completed Reload using 100% social link guide. So I did them all. I did everything. Which is not how I recommend people, first-timers, play this, because that guide expects you to do a lot of Tartarus at once. Let me just say in all at once. Let me just say that you got to be a little bit experienced with these systems to.
You like grinding in Tartarus? Well, this is the guide for you.
I wouldn't necessarily say grinding necessarily, but I would say you need to be good at SP management and knowing what fights are and aren't worth taking, and just generally good at not burning your SP by losing fights and shit. You know what I mean. Like there are games I would recommend max guides to for first runs. Like I think maybe actually. Yeah, P5R is probably easy enough that I would say you could do that. This game, no, the schedule is really tight, and the expectations for your the efficiency of your dungeon crawling, let's put it that way, are a little higher. So, but anyway, I did that, and I had a good time. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The Link episodes flesh things out. Dorm activities at night are appreciated. These are things you can do with your party members, like the gardening, the cooking, watching TV, and what I consider to be the weirdest one, and maybe this is just a Japanese culture thing I've somehow never stumbled upon, but this like mutual reading shit where you like you take a party member and you both read the same book in silence and then have a conversation about it. This is a weird. This mutual reading thing, that one I don't quite get. That one feels a little weird.
Dual track reading?
Yeah, I don't quite know if anyone actually does that.
No, it's co-op reading. It's co-op reading.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anyone actually does that. That one's a bit weird to me.
I don't know, man. Yeah, because, like, people have different reading speeds. Like, fucking...
I can see a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I think more to the point... It's just kind of a shitty way to spend time together, you know?
Yeah, because you're not saying much. You're just kind of sitting there in silence and then occasionally being like, hey, on this page...
No, I didn't get there yet. You know, and like, you know what I mean? Like, just...
Yeah, and then you have to wait.
That one's weird. That one's a bit weird. But anyway, it's all appreciated, these little interactions that kind of flesh out. And I was building up to a point, and yes, I know, all over the place. But you came here. I'm probably going to put the word rambling in the title, so you know what you clicked on.
Yeah.
Is that one of the reasons P3 was my least favorite Hoshino era game is because I felt like C's was a bit undercooked as characters. Now a lot of people like to counter this and be like, one of the reasons they really like P3 is because it interweaves the characters' arcs through the main story in a way 4 and 5 don't as much. 4 and 5 are a bit more compartmentalized with their character focus and development. And I will agree to that point to an extent. But I think the basis and the arcs in P3 are a bit more... The reason I don't like it as much is the fact that it's intertwined in the main narrative is really nice. But I don't think they're as impressive or interesting. But I will say, I think all the extra... Part of the thing is that the original... And this is what I'm going to get into as far as changing the overall tone of the game. The original release and FES and all that, like when I say the original release, I mean like the original FES and P3P, preload stuff, yeah, if you will.
Yeah.
The original.
Persona 3 load.
Sure. The original game could be kind of lonely at times, and that led to and a lot of that was kind of incidental just because of like development realities. You know, they couldn't just pump it chock full of social events like they could in later games. Infamously, in the original, there wasn't a whole lot to do at night, for example, and now there's all these dorm activities, which is a great thing, but it does change the mood of the game. Also, the social links didn't used to be voiced, and now they are, and that kind of psychologically changes things. It makes the game feel peppier, more lively, more social.
That's also not helped by some of the visual design changes that they've made to elements of the art style.
I'll get into that. I want to kind of stay focused on the topic for a second.
That's fair.
No. This is what you're here for. But it does change the mood somewhat, because I feel like part of the point of the original game, and this is a reason people will bring up as a defense of the AI-controlled party members, which are gone. Well, they're not gone. You can toggle them if you want, but who's going to do that?
Yeah. They're there if you feel so inclined, but why would you?
Yeah. You can do direct control now, which is nice. This was one of the big... Defenders of the AI-controlled party members will often argue that the entire point of the system was the fact that you couldn't just control other people. The game was about forming connections with other people, and so it made sense that, from a combat perspective, that your allies would make their own decisions, and wouldn't... You could instruct them generally in terms of your command options, like conserve SP, or like be aggressive, be defensive, shit like that. You could kind of direct them to act in certain ways, but ultimately they were their own people that were going to make their own decisions. And the AI party members system kind of enforced that. And I do think that's probably what they were going for, and that's a really good point. However, unfortunately, the PS2, the PlayStation 2, was not capable of having actual functioning living beings emulated inside of it. It was an algorithm that made decisions, and a lot of the times it made poor decisions in ways that don't sort of help the theme of them being... Like, I understand what they were going for with the AI party members not being controllable, because they're other people with their own lives. You can reach out and connect to them, but they're ultimately going to make their own decisions. The problem is, when it's an AI, it's going to make bad decisions, and not in ways that people make bad decisions. You know what I mean? Like, if I was actually leading a squad of people doing this, yes, they're going to make their own decisions, they're going to make their own tactical calls and whatnot, but they're going to have a actual, like, human logic to it. The problem with the AI is that it kind of responds to things in a very algorithmic checkbox, they have this, I do that sort of way. And pretty infamously, one of the weaknesses of the AI party members is their inability to plan ahead, in the way you can do with direct controls. Like, the AI is going to respond to the situation as presented right in front of it. It's not really going to think ahead too much in terms of, like, 2 or 3 moves down the line. If I do this, what is the board state going to look like 2 turns from now, the way actual humans would. So while I think the AI party members were a cool experiment, I don't miss them.
Yeah, the problem with the AI party members is that it just takes control away from the player, and it doesn't allow for as much... honestly, this is the biggest issue that I have, is one of the biggest draws to a turn-based RPG is strategy, being able to plan and strategize how fights go. Having all of your party members be controlled by the computer means that you're not strategizing, you're trying to plan for the bullshit that the computer is going to try and do.
It's a form of strategizing, but it doesn't necessarily feel good to strategize around your uncontrollable teammates, and it especially never felt good to lose because of their dumb decisions. So I'm glad that system is not what we go with here necessarily. And you can still play that way if you want, which is good for Mother's Basement and people like him. Yeah, I know. But anyway, the point I was making though is that stuff though, that AI controlled party members, it did help the atmosphere of kind of the loneliness of the game and the difficulty in forming connections with others. And I think the biggest change Reload makes is not in any of its new content necessarily, but somewhat in the atmosphere. The vibes are different, and people have noticed that the vibes are different. And I think that's going to be kind of the most contentious thing about Reload, is that before, the game felt kind of lonely because a lot of dialogue was unvoiced. You didn't have nearly as much opportunity to build connections with your party members. Your party members literally couldn't even be controlled by you, so you felt there was a sense of isolation to it.
Yeah.
Now, those social elements, not only are there more of those social elements, they're also thrust upon you in more direct, like, you don't have to go out and, you don't necessarily have to, you can, but you don't have to go out and seek them as much. Whereas in the original, you kind of had to. But here, and I'm going to get to it, I told you I was going to get to it.
Yeah.
The cell phone.
Here we go.
So...
This is like the one thing he's been talking about the most to me through like DMs and also on Twitter.
Yeah.
So.
The cell phone. Let me talk about the cell phone for a second.
You used to call me on my cell phone.
It is not unreasonable for a bunch of teenagers in 2009 to have flip phones in Japan.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense contextually. This is not about an anachronism or anything like that. But they utilize... Somehow this game utilizes the phone even more than P5 does. Somehow.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, people are constantly... Maybe about as much, I don't know. People are constantly texting you. Not everybody, like all the like most of your social links that'll be available at any given day will be texting you to hang out, like constantly.
Yeah.
And that's a great convenience feature because you can like see the text and respond to it and be like, okay, I'll just teleport to where they are because I wish that's how cell phones worked. But it changes the mood. Because now you don't have to go out and seek those. You don't have that loop that happened in the original game a lot of the time, where you're like, okay, well, I know that person is at that location some days, but not other days. So you had to actually go there and check to see if they were even there to hang out with or not. And then you had to check to make sure you had a matching persona to get the most points. Or if you could even rank up that day. That's mostly gone in the system because of these convenience features, and it makes the game feel a bit less isolated, and it makes it kind of dampens part of the theme of the game, which is this struggle to reach out and connect to other people. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely takes the evolution of the series and backports it to this game. It feels lively in the ways that P4 and P5 do. It doesn't have that sort of isolated, reaching out to connect feeling that the original game had. And I feel like that's probably the biggest difference to me, is just the general atmosphere and feel.
Yeah.
And of course, as all the visuals also tie into this. And I guess I was in the middle of a different rant, but I guess I'll talk about the visuals real quick. The visuals are good, but kind of lopsided. This is their first project in Unreal, so some stuff is... Some roughness might be expected. And again, it wasn't like the biggest budget project or anything. But there is definitely a bit of a lopside. I think anything at night during the dark hour looks great. Tartarus looks great. The actual... When you're, like, dungeon crawling, it looks fantastic. I think it's a lot of the daily life stuff that doesn't look as polished. A lot of the areas around town, the dorms in particular, look weirdly unfinished, and don't have the same... I think the main thing is that the dorms don't have the same moody lighting that the original did. And especially the movies. If you watch the movies and then play this game, the dorm feels like an entirely different place.
Yeah.
Because the original game... And the movies took from the original game and gave the dorms this sort of weird, this sort of moody look to them. It wasn't super well lit. In this game, it's bright as fuck.
Like in the original game and the movies. I'm familiar with the movies again.
Yeah.
It's dark. It feels it's dark and it feels lonely.
Yeah.
But that's not really the case in P3R, as far as I've seen.
Yeah, in Reload, it's well lit, perhaps too well lit, perhaps unnaturally well lit. And because of all the activities and whatnot, feels way more lively. And that is probably what some people wanted. And also, like I said, it did help me connect with C's as a group more.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is that it does take away a bit of the atmosphere of the original.
One thing that, you described P3, like, the general vibe that you described the original P3 with is it still had it was still 1 foot in Shin Megami Tensei.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is also reflected in the overall mood and tone of the game, which is generally speaking a lot darker and a lot more isolated comparative to the later Persona games.
Yeah, I don't know. I and I've said this before. I think the darkness of P3 is a bit overstated, but again, there's definitely there's a mood difference. This game is, and it's a lot of little things. It's the cell phone, yeah, a little bit. It's the cell phone. It's the constant quality of life features where people are constantly texting you. It's the liveliness. It's the additional social events that make the game just feel a bit more. It makes the struggle for connecting with others feel a little bit easier because they're literally throwing themselves at you. It's the bright lighting in the daytime scenes. You know, it's stuff like that that affects the mood. And so mood. Those are kind of objectively good things. I can't help but wonder if there might have been a slightly more tasteful way to do this. Like, build on those connections and build on those character dynamics and stuff, but in a way that doesn't conflict so much with the original tone. So I've seen people describe this as P3 for the P5 fan, and to an extent I kind of get that. I kind of get that.
Yeah.
Like I said, if the original release still had 1 foot in SMT, this feels like it's completely side-shifted over to what Persona is now, you know? And that couldn't be a good or bad thing depending on your individual tastes. I'm kind of ambivalent because I like both of those things. But, and also as someone pointed out, well, I did just praise the Dark Hour scenes as looking really good. I think that's where they put most of their visual energy. It does take after the movies cue a lot. I read a post that I agree with where someone's like, in the original game, the Dark Hour was primarily emphasized by being, you know, dark. It was dark with like green and red highlights. The movies made it mostly green with a lot of bright red highlights, and that's what this game takes after. And so it definitely does. Go on.
Yeah, the movies give the Dark Hour a very like almost neon look.
Yes, which is cool, but not quite what the original game was going for. That is a significant difference. Again, I think both looks are cool, but it is another instance in which things are being kind of brightened up and cheered up a little bit. And there's also the what I like to call another aspect that I think changes the tone is that a lot of the new events, while I do like them, obviously they've had 18 years to reflect on this story, and so there's been a lot of like there's a lot of established history and like build-ups and stuff like that, and like it feels the new events feel a little bit fanficky in the way they can sometimes build up the net. I'm not saying it's necessarily the worst thing, but like it's like in the way they build up future events, or certain scenes are presented with a bit more reverence than they had in the original because it's a famous game, it's a famous story, you know, that people have grown to love over the past 18 years. And so this is kind of a grander topic about remakes in general, but you ever get the sense in certain remakes that like things get presented with a bit more grandiosity or reverence than they were in the original? Because when you did it the first time, you know, it felt humble and unassuming. Like they didn't know it was going to be a pop culture phenomenon. But when they remake it with the reverence of 2 decades of having, you know, been told that story. And so it kind of gets presented in a slightly different light. You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about, and there's one, maybe this is just because it recently got released on Blu-ray from Discotech, but Nanoha has a bit of that in the first movie remake.
Yeah.
Nanoha has this attack called the Starlight Breaker, and in the original TV series, the Starlight Breaker is still her most powerful attack spell.
Yeah.
It is a large-scale bombardment spell, but in the original, in the TV series, it's represented as kind of just a very large beam laser that she fires after gathering up a bunch of energy. It's upgraded in the movie to basically being a mini nuke.
Yeah.
and it's presented with the grandiosity of, oh, she's gonna do it!
Yeah.
Like, you even have this hard cut to Raising a Heart in the movie, and Raising a Heart openly announces Starlight Breaker, and then the music, like, switches over to the Starlight Breaker theme. It's like a whole thing in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of that sort of thing in this remake where like certain scenes kind of get punched up because they know like it's that scene. Everyone knows that scene. Like everyone knows the in-engine cutscenes I think have this the most, where it's like it's the Orpheus awakening. Everyone knows the Orpheus awakening. It's Shinjiro's death. Everyone knows Shinjiro's death, and so these big iconic scenes get bigger and more iconicer. And it kind of it definitely, it's not a bad thing, but it does change the mood and the presentation somewhat, because the original game was a little flat. It was a little unassuming. I think everyone's pointed out how the original opening, the 2D cutscene in the original, was a little avant-garde, a little unnerving in some ways, and it's kind of gotten more standardized, and I think
kind of more dramatized, I'd say.
A little bit. And I think one thing that points out is that, and part of this might just be culture, we've gotten used to the idea of P3, but like in 2006, the idea of summoning monsters by shooting yourself in the head was kind of edgier than it is now, somehow.
Yeah, like back then, people tend to forget, I was not a Persona fan. The one thing I knew about Persona 3 is that it was the game where you shoot yourself in the head to attack people.
Yes.
And
I feel like that's a little bit downplayed here, not only because we've gotten used to it, but also a lot of it has to do with the scale of the scale of the shot. So in the original, they had, I'm not going to say chibify, but they had like diminutized models, stylized, diminutive,
stylized diminutive models.
Yeah, and that meant that the evoker took up was larger. It was a larger model comparative to the person using it, and so the camera shots focused a lot on the actual shooting of yourself in the head. But when you bring that up to when you bring these characters up to a realistic scale, the evoker becomes a lot smaller in the frame, and so in the camera shot, the camera doesn't focus on it as much, and it's little things like that that change the presentation and thus change the mood a little bit. They still do it, obviously, but it's not, the camera isn't focusing on it. And even if it was focusing on it, it would be a smaller part of the shot because, you know, the model, the distinguishing size between the evoker model and the character model is much larger than it was originally.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say that you can't present the evoker and evoking your persona with realistic proportions and not have it still have the same effect as the original game. I move again to the Persona 3 movies, where one of the biggest things that really stuck out to me about that was actually how the characters react to the fact that they have to force their personas out in that way. Probably the biggest one is Yukari, like, visibly hesitating, putting the gun to her forehead, and like having to actually do that. Like, she has to visualize her own death in that moment, and like the weight of that is actually emphasized in the movie.
Yeah, and that first scene is still in this game, but like after that, it doesn't have the same focus that the movie shots do or that the original game does constantly, and it's a small thing. And it might just be because we've just gotten accustomed to the idea. It's kind of we're desensitized to it a little bit, but it's another thing that kind of changes the mood, I feel. And so I think the big thing for me is, would I recommend Reload over the original? Yeah, absolutely. It's got a million more quality of life features. It's way more accessible. It's prettier. You know, it just plays better. But I will say the biggest difference to me is that the mood is slightly different because of 1,000 little things.
There is a noticeable shift in the overall tone of the game and how it represents itself, how it represents the dark hour, how it represents the social links, how it represents the character and his relationship to other people, and how it represents death.
Yeah.
Which was a major part of Persona 3's themes and ideas.
Yeah. Also, another little thing I told you about is the shift from the original game is narrated. The original game, much like 3 and 4, was narrated in second-person perspective. This changes it to be more like P5, where it's narrated from the protagonist's head. It's in first-person perspective. It's a tiny change, but it kind of changes how you interface with the game. And I think part of the reason, some of it is visual, some of it is audio, like the bit crushed audio of the original and whatnot. You know, people have often said that there's an atmospheric quality to like N64 or PS1, PS2 games that is really hard to do these days. And I think part of it is because of the presentation of the game as a product is a lot cleaner than it used to be. It's cleaner, more polished, more convenient. It exists more for you. Before, back in those days, you were kind of bereft of options, you know?
Yeah.
When you started a game up, you put the disc in, you went to the PS2 menu, which was atmospheric in itself, and then you pressed play. And the game just ran. You didn't set up a bunch of options beforehand. You weren't concerned about your frame pacing or, you know, making sure everything worked right. You know, you didn't have all these quality of life features, these notifications telling you all this information beforehand or during the thing. There was a bit less tutorializing. And again, it was narrated in second person perspective that made it feel almost like the game was happening without you, and then the notifications were just kind of for your benefit to be like, you know, summing it up in a way. Here you are a more active part of the experience that is actively being tailored for you. And it's a small thing, but it's just another thing that kind of changes the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the sheen, it's the polish.
I'm reminded of that Scanline video that H-Bomber Guy did about VHS tapes and how when he was watching Alien, the original Alien on VHS, there was just that veneer of darkness behind all of the fuzz and all of the static of the VHS tape and the CRT, where you couldn't quite tell what was going on in the background. Literally just the mechanisms of the ship could be mistaken for the alien itself at any time, but modern Blu-ray and DVD releases of Alien are so much cleaner and so much clearer that you can tell what's going on in the frame. So whenever the alien shows up, it's more so just a matter of course. It's the same film, it's the same experience, but it does feel different because of that extra polish, because of that extra level of clarity offered by more modern presentations of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like a PS2 game like P3 FES is kind of in a similar way, where a lot of the details are too low res to make out. The audio is all bit crushed, and so it has this sort of more ethereal presentation to it, as opposed to a modern production like Reload, where everything is crystal clear and presented to you in 4K 60 FPS, and like, you know what I mean? Like, it just creates this. I'm not saying artistically there isn't a way to make it work. I just don't. A relatively straightforward Unreal remake like this is not going to be the one to do that. So that, and then getting back to the topic that got us on this topic, I was talking about story editions. Like I said, linked episode, dorm activities, and then the third major one is that there have been some adjustments to the main plot, mostly concerning Strega. This seems to have been a significant focus of theirs. Strega was kind of underwritten in the original, to put it mildly. They're just kind of guys that get in your way. These weird nihilists that just sort of stand. I guess this is where I get into some of my greater issues with P3 as a whole, whereas that I think the character arcs are good for the most part. I think the way some of them are paced are a little weird, but they're mostly good. The themes and ideas I really like. Obviously, I think this game has one of the best endings of any JRPG ever made. All that stuff is great. It's the gears of the plot itself that I've never been a big fan of. This full moon shadow of the month sort of structure. A lot of the background elements of the plot are really slapdash, and for the most part, they are still slapdash. And you get situations. The original game had situations like Strega, who are built up to be these big antagonists, but severely underwritten and underpresented. it felt like the game almost couldn't... The game story, and some of this is the same in Reload, it almost couldn't decide what was important, in a way. Because it builds up Strega, but then you have the big Akutsuki twist, and you're like, oh, is Akutsuki going to be like the main villain? No, we kill him off immediately. Okay, is Strega going to be the main villain? No, it's actually Nyx. They're just kind of also there doing their own thing. It's like, well, okay. It's kind of messy, in a way. Like, it couldn't quite pick a thing. So here, there is a bit of an attempt to meld it together. I'm not going to say, though, that they knocked it out of the park, though, because I think... Okay, I'm gonna focus on Strega first. Okay, so... Takaya has a lot more scenes in this game. A lot more scenes, some optional, some not, where he interacts one-on-one with the protagonist, and you get a little bit more of his mindset, his mentality, about the situation. You get a bit more of his motivation. These are well done, and I do find it funny that we're basically Adachi-ifying Takaya in retrospect. That's really funny to me. They did the same thing with Adachi in Golden, which was magnificent. One of the reasons I think Golden is definitive over the original, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is because Adachi is way better fleshed out in Golden.
Yeah.
And they do something similar with Takaya here. Granted, it's not... Most of it is nothing you couldn't infer from the original. It's just kind of elaborated upon, and showed in more detail. And also, he is in. I should also talk about the new cast as well at some point, and I'm going to. But just as a quick note, he's now voiced by Damon Mills. Do you know Damon Mills?
I do know Damon Mills. Yeah, he's the current voice of Frieza, actually.
Oh, is he? Interesting.
I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, then he's had practice. No, he's really good here. Originally Takaya was voiced by Derek Stephen Prince, and I love Derek Stephen Prince, but I actually think Damon Mills does a better job here. Particularly,
Damon Mills is really good at doing these kind of like unsettling characters, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic here. I actually think Damon Mills has one of the best performances in the game, in a game with a lot of great performances in it. And he gets a lot to work with Takaya's expanded material here, which I really like. So he has quite a bit more scenes, sort of building up to their confrontations that I do appreciate. And another thing is that, so in the original game, in the January section, after you refuse to, after New Year's, where you refuse to kill Ryoji, and so the fall is coming. In the original game, and I don't remember if this was actually in the movies or not, but in the background, in terms of the NPCs and the TVs and all that, there's a cult forming in the background worshipping Nyx and cheering on the coming of the fall. And this cult grows in number and importance. And this is just kind of a background element of the original. In Reload, they make it so that this cult is started by and propagated by Strega. Which is a neat little change. That they turn Takaya into this sort of cult leader. This doesn't get a ton of focus because again they're sticking to the same narrative beats, but there definitely is more of a focus on this cult and expanding on the idea that the fall is coming because a large enough contingent of humanity wishes for death, and has little faith in the world and is bringing about the end. It gets into it because the whole thing is that the Kirijo group experimented with the shadows, which are the collective unconscious of humanity, and so through those experiments, the manifestation of humanity's desire for death sort of manifested, and then it forms the 12 shadows that call down, that bring the appraiser, which brings down the call of Nyx, and so who is the entity that brought the concept of death to the world, but was sealed away by Erebus or whatever. That's getting into the answer. Anyway, the point is, the idea that Strega forms this cult and Takaya, you get more of Takaya's mindset. It definitely improves the connective tissue in some places in terms of reinforcing the idea that the fall is happening because a large enough contingent of humanity wishes for it. That aspect is good. Again, it's kind of minor. Once again, January doesn't have a whole lot going on in this game. But in terms of connecting that background element from the original to a group that is ostensibly supposed to be one of our main antagonists, good idea. I like that. Something else I've often pointed out is that I wish there was more connective tissue between Akutsuki and Strega. Because Akutsuki kind of just comes across like just a guy who happens to be crazy. Like, he had... In the original, he had shockingly little character presence. Like, shockingly little for the guy who's responsible for betraying you and turning planning everything. For the guy behind the entire plot of the game, shockingly little character presence.
It's just like, hey, this guy who looks like fucking Hobo Jesus with a revolver, yeah, he's the bad guy.
No, that's Takaya. I'm talking about it.
Right. Sorry.
I understand how you're.
Sorry.
I kind of understand how you're confused though, because they kind of look similar, which makes you think that there might be a connection between them, like they're either like the same person or like they're twin brothers or something. But no, in the original they were completely. They were just acting completely independent of each other, which is kind of odd from a screenwriting perspective. Yeah, I know it's been a while for you. No, Akutsuki is the chairman with the glasses. He's the guy with the ponytail that makes the bad jokes.
Yeah. Okay, I know him. Yeah.
See, this is part of the problem. He had so little presence that Kevin not only didn't remember him, but confused him with a different character. This is what I'm getting at. Thanks for proving my point.
Takaya has a more iconic design.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. I'm not angry. I'm happy you're proving my point right now. Anyway, Akutsuki. So, the Akutsuki twist mostly happens the same way it does in the original, but there are a couple of things that make me like it a little bit more. First of all, his death gets an in-engine cutscene now, and so his death scene is a little bit more elongated. They also kind of expand on his motivations a little. He's still a crazy person, but they do kind of... And if this was added in, like, Portable or whatever, and I'm just not remembering very well, I apologize. This could be old information that was either expanded upon or just made more obvious here. I don't know. It's been a little bit for me, too. But they do sort of establish that he believes that... It's kind of the classic case of bringing about the end because you think you're going to become some sort of ruler or, like, important person in the new world or whatever. He kind of has a self-aggrandizing prophecy in his head where he thinks that if he brings about the fall, he will become the prince of the new world. He will be the prince because of some old fucking shadow prophecy about a prince that will bring about the fall and become ruler of the new world or whatever. So he's got a god complex. Okay, I'm like, it's nothing special, but it's something. It's something. He's still weirdly disconnected from everything, and I still think the twist has absolutely zero foreshadowing to it, which is annoying, and I still think the entire plot hinges on everyone kind of just getting tricked by this guy who doesn't do anything particularly impressive, doesn't have much character focus or presence, and gets immediately killed off after the reveal. All of that is still here, and I think that's all still dumb, but I will admit, they did kind of expound on his motivations a little bit, and his death scene is definitely more cathartic. So, an improvement. Hooray.
Yeah.
And I haven't told you this bit yet. They actually do make a connection between Akutsuki and Strega.
Oh, do they?
Yes, and I haven't told you because I just found out about it last night because it's that last minute of a thing.
Oh, grand.
Yeah. Now, I want to preface this by saying, overall, I do like this change. I wish they had gone farther with it. So apparently, Strega are actually children. They were children. They're not now, obviously, but they were children that the Kirijo group experimented on to try to orphan. They rounded up a bunch of orphans and tried to forcefully awaken personas in them for research purposes. This is just something like Mitsuru's grandfather was fucking doing, which is in character with his original portrayal. That's fine. But it is new information. And so Strega's background here is that they are some of the kids that were experimented on in terms of forcefully awakening their personas, which does kind of explain where the fuck they came from and why they are so connected to the Dark Hour and why they don't want to lose their powers and all that. Makes sense. They expand a little bit on Jin, who in the original was little more than just kind of a henchman without much. He was just kind of a snarky henchman to Takaya, who you didn't really get a sense of why they were even partners. Yeah. Here, it's established that they were both orphans in this program, and Takaya was kind of the light of his dark tunnel. Like, he kind of just saved him with his words. And it does kind of present this interesting dichotomy where Takaya is a complete nihilist. He doesn't believe in humanity, in connections, and like he's kind of the antithesis of the game's central themes in a lot of ways, and that's built up more here, which I do appreciate. But he does have, through his connection to Jin, which is stronger here, and also his interest in the protagonist. The game also kind of implies that despite everything he says, he's kind of a hypocrite in a lot of ways, because he actually. The potential for connections are there, he's just actively choosing not to engage in them, which I do find interesting. And again, I do like the connection with Strega to the Kirijo group, and then they make the connection that Ikutsuki was one of the researchers involved in that group. Now, granted, I wish they went a bit further with this, because basically, the way they phrase it, they only knew Ikutsuki by his name. They didn't know him, they weren't working with him or anything, and so you still have this narrative problem in my mind where you have two different independent antagonistic forces both wanting the same thing but not working together or even much aware of each other's existence. So Reload does add a bit of connective tissue there, but it's very last minute and it's very sort of, here's one for the wiki, here's some spicy tidbits for you, instead of actually fundamentally reworking this background plot.
Yeah.
I like it. I think these are good ideas. I wish they expanded upon them more. I wish, and that gets into one of my main, I guess you could call it a disappointment, but it's more like an observation with this remake, which is that it's kind of faithful to a fault. Like I said, their entire mentality is add, don't change. They added new details, they added new connective tissue, they fleshed some things out in some ways, but they didn't change anything fundamentally about the structure of the narrative, and that means that they can't fix some of the core problems I've always had with it. They can only sort of just give me new spicy tidbits. And I like spicy tidbits, but they don't make up for...
Spicy tidbits or allude to fixes that were done in other mediums like the movies.
Yes. Some of that is alluded to, some of it isn't. For example, I said that one of the things I complained to you about is that Ken and Shinjiro's dynamic from the movies is not carried over here.
Which is so unfortunate, because that's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Oh yeah, that's a really great change that the movies made, that Reload... I don't know if it was a limitation of the calendar system, they couldn't figure out how to do it, or they just, again, were just adhering to the original story too much, but, well, both of their characters do get fleshed out with their Link episodes and various dorm activities and stuff like that. They do feel more fleshed out as characters individually. They don't have the same connection they do in the movies, and so you have the same kind of problem in the original where the whole Ken Shinjiro thing feels a bit rushed, and it kind of makes Ken feel a bit unlikable at first, because it feels more premeditated than it does in the movies. You have that problem. That problem was fixed in the movies, and now it's back. So that's great. So there's a couple of instances like that where it's kind of like one step forward, one step back in terms of reaching the ephemeral, perfect, supposedly definitive version of the story that exists somewhere if you combine enough different elements of different adaptations. So there is that. I appreciate the new additions because I do like C's more as a group now. It also helps that Some of them are voiced by actual voice actors now, and not Jen from accounting. I have nearly 1,000 upvotes on that comment, by the way, so I'm very proud of that one.
It's okay.
Yeah, I could say, yeah. No, I like Fuka a lot more here than I ever did in the original. And a lot of it is because she actually has a voice actress who is really cute sounding and really endearing and doesn't sound like a bored woman they got from the accounting department. And I like that.
It's worth pointing out, Fuka, I'm actually looking at the Wikipedia page for the characters. Fuka's original actress isn't even fucking listed. They only list Wendy Lee, who plays her from Persona 4 Arena onwards, and Susie Young from Reload.
Yes. In the original, I believe she was voiced by Paula Tiso. I think that's her name. She was also Jennifer in The Sky Hour of Darkness.
Yeah. Paula Tiso, yeah.
Yeah. She was not a great actress, and she's not doing much these days. I think she had her stint, and I think she stopped. Once the standards for the industry kind of rose, I think they stopped casting her in things.
The most that she does these days is from what I can tell, she mostly just does like minor roles in video games and shit, and not really a whole lot of that.
Yeah. Maybe she's better now. I don't know. I haven't heard her in anything in a long time. But back in the day, didn't do a great job. That's all I'm saying on that.
Yeah.
So we do have cases like that. Most of the cast, I will say, is either just as good or maybe slightly better than the people they're replacing. And also sounding very similar in most cases, too, which is kind of an impressive feat of the casting department. It's not necessarily easy to get new talent that sounds evocative enough of the old talent while also bringing their own spin to it. That's hard to do for an entire cast.
Yeah.
But they really did it here. Like I said, most of them I think are just as good, if not better. There's only a couple of cases where I feel like there's like a standout knockout in either direction. And there's only one recast I don't really love. And you know which one I'm talking about, and I'm going to get into it.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna
controversial take coming in.
Yeah, this is probably
hot.
Yeah, this is probably a hot take, and I might regret saying it, but I'm gonna say it. And first of all, I want to say, no disrespect to this person, they put in the work. I'm just gonna say that. Like, I'm not gonna say their performance is bad. It's good. Like, it's good, and I get why other people like it. I don't love Zeno Robinson's Junpei.
Zeno Robinson is a really, really good actor.
I loved him in The Owl House. He was fantastic.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He was also the replacement voice for Tai in the Digimon Adventure reboot, which, bad reboot, really good casting. I think he was actually a really good choice to replace. I think it was actually a really good choice to replace.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah. No, he's a great voice actor, and he's done amazing work, and he will continue to do amazing work. I don't love him as Junpei for reasons outside of the effort he put in. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I think his voice is very naturally high register and squeaky. And one of the things I liked about, yes, I'm about to praise Vic Mignogna, just pre-cancel me now. One of the things I liked about Vic's portrayal is that Vic has a naturally lower register, but for Junpei he put on a bit of a higher falsetto, so it kind of gives off the impression of just some guy who's very excitable and like self-important. But he has that kind of down to earth, but he can also have that kind of down to earth sort of very grounded line delivery as well, just depending on the situation. And I really liked that about his performance. It felt kind of grounded in a way, and I felt like the naturally lower register with the higher falsetto really was kind of the Junpei experience. The problem I have with Zeno's performance is that it's very high register, it's very squeaky, and it kind of this is gonna sound fucking stupid, but it sounds a little too cartoony. Which is a weird thing to say about an anime dub, but I think that it's a gradient, it's a scale. There's levels to this, and I feel like his portrayal of Junpei is a little bit too far in the cartoony side. And even at the very end of the game, after all of his best scenes, and again I'm going to say it,
acting-wise, he did a great job. You know, it's just in the back of my mind, I can't. It never melded for me. It never got to a point where I'm like, I'm no longer listening to Zeno Robinson. I'm listening to Junpei. I never made that mental connection because just the qualities of his voice are just not what I associate with the character. And so there was always that he was the only one in the whole cast where there was that kind of friction where like I was very aware I was listening to a voice actor. And most people will probably not have that problem. This is a me problem. I want to point that out. But for me, it's the one piece of this puzzle that just didn't quite click. Now he still does a great job. It's not like It's not distracting. It's not bad, obviously. Like again, it's good. He's putting in the work. As someone on Twitter said, he acted his heart out like the rent was due, because apparently it was.
As voice acting do.
Yeah.
No, honestly, this isn't even the first time that I've seen people. Look, here's the thing: people love to goof on Vic Mignogna and whatever few to you, but like, I still think he was a good. I still think he's a really good voice actor.
Yes. Yeah.
And there is a reason why he was in the industry and such a prevalent part of the industry, even when other actors of similar age to him, like, started falling off in terms of casting. Like, he still got regular roles up until he was blacklisted.
The Incident.
Yeah, up until The Incident.
Yeah.
But, like, there are those moments where it's like, this isn't the first time where I've seen him, a character he played, come back in a new installment of a series, and he just has a new voice actor now, and the voice actor doesn't quite hit. The biggest example I can think of is Crow Bronwyn in Ruby, where from Volume 7 onward, he's played by Jason Liebrecht, where Jason Liebrecht does a good job, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
And it misses that kind of, honestly, in the case of Crow Bronwyn, in the case of Crow, Jason Liebrecht's take on the character kind of misses that combination of youthfulness, but also that just kind of like tired weariness that the character has. Like that.
It misses the gravitas.
It misses the gravitas of the character. Again, I like Jason Liebrecht's Crow. Don't get me wrong; he's doing good, but like, there's something missing. Yeah, and that's just kind of the thing that you come into with a lot of characters when there's this one really iconic performance of the character, or there's this one performance where that actor or actress really made that character their own. Yeah. And this person has to measure up to that.
I'm also kind of I don't know why they didn't call Landon McDonald. He seems to be like kind of the de facto Vic replacement guy, but they didn't get him here for some reason.
That's the guy that replaced him for Rohan Kishibe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, dude, when I heard the English dub of Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan, I was like, did they just get Vic back? No, completely different guy. But
yeah, I don't know why they didn't. Maybe they tried. I don't know. I don't know why they didn't get Landon McDonald. That seemed like the no-brainer decision to me.
It's weird. It's really weird.
When they first announced the casting, I was like, Zeno Robinson. That's an interesting pivot. Yep. Good actor, but that's a pivot. And I'm sorry, I went through the whole game. I never got over that feeling. It's not. I don't vibe with him as this character. He does a great job, and I'm sure most people are not going to have these issues. But for me, it's the one performance that didn't connect. Everyone else I thought was really good. It was either as good or better than their original portrayals. Generally, great work all around. I think I was in the middle of something. I think I was in the middle of a different topic when we switched to this voice acting thing. I think I was still talking about Strega. Right.
I think you were. You were.
Yeah, Strega. One other interesting change is that Takaya actually gets to witness Nyx's descent, which is interesting. Yeah, in the original game and in the movies, you might have remembered he was just knocked out beforehand. Here he gets knocked to the ground, and then they go to fight Nyx. But after you do the boss fight, he actually comes up to the top of the tower, and he's all like beat up. He's like, finally, it's happening. Like they give him that sort of deal, and he actually gets to be kind of a part of that scene, which is interesting because he keeps spouting bullshit, and everyone just tells him to shut up, which is definitely a different take on that scene. But yeah, he actually gets to be part of that scene and see what he wanted the whole time, which is interesting. It's an interesting little change. It's probably the closest this game actually comes to deviating from quote-unquote canon.
Deviating from the source material.
Kind of, because it's one of the only times where, like, instead of, like, adding more scenes, they actually changed the way a scene played out. Not in any way that actually ends up mattering, but it is interesting, and it contributes to... I feel like there was a bit of an attempt to make Takaya feel a bit more like a... I don't know about... Not the main antagonist. The main antagonist is the concept of death itself. But more of an active presence in the plot. And I do think for the most part they succeed with that. Even if I wish they went a little bit further with it by more closely tying the Akutsuki shit to the Strega shit, to the fall, to the you know what I'm talking.
Yeah.
Like the last third of this game, despite its high points, has always bothered me because of how it has all this shit going on that just doesn't connect. It's got the Akutsuki betrayal, but then there's also Strega running around, but then Ryoji comes in and you have to build up his character for a little bit, and then Nyx comes in, and it's like it's all these dominoes just kind of stacking on each other, but not like in a cohesive sort of, way. It's just a lot of ideas. And this game still has that problem, but it has been fleshed out a bit and smoothed over a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
Also, Ryoji is great. The linked episodes are great. Alex Lee, who also voices the protagonist naturally, does a great job. Interestingly, I do agree with what some people say. I really like Alex Lee's. I like his Ryoji. I like the grunts he does for the main character. Obviously, I like his Ryoji a lot. His Faro/Ryoji. The Nyx avatar portion. I agree with some people that I think Yuri Lowenthal did a slightly better job there, or maybe it was an audio mixing thing. Like if you've ever heard the fucking clips, the Arcana reveals all when mankind tasted the fruit of knowledge, all that shit.
Yeah,
you might remember that. Yuri's clips have this sort of distorted, otherworldly quality to them that I think really benefited the performance. Like the Ryoji voice was like buried deep down in there, but it was like mostly this like malevolent entity. In Alex's version of the Nyx avatar, it's a bit more clear. You can like definitely, it feels more like Ryoji's voice being like down one octave and amplified through a filter. It's still good, but it's not as ethereal as the original. So I'll point that out as a weakness I agree with other people on. But like aside from like little nitpicks like that, the cast overall was great. But like I said, the story, aside from the additions of the Link episodes and the dorm activities and a bit more focus on Strega, mostly plays out the same way. And I think people might have mixed feelings on that. Because again, much like the gameplay itself and the structure of the overall game, I feel like people might have expected a more extensive revamping of things in the remake that they always asked for. But this is very true to the original. I can see two different thumbnails in my mind. One that says, oh my god, they nailed it, it's perfect, it's fantastic, they stay true to it. And then another thumbnail that says, faithful to a fault? ? And I definitely think those are two valid reactions to have to it. Because
it's kind of just the duality of it's just kind of the duality of this game where depending on how you want to look at it, it is either a really great remake that captures the spirit of the original, or it's a remake that doesn't do enough to really improve upon or outshine the original. It's just caught in the middle there.
It feels like an exercise in... It feels like an exercise in creative preservation in a lot of ways. Like that interview that came out where they're just like, where one of the producers or directors of the game, I forget exactly who said this, where they're like, good things don't wither or whatever. You know, we made something good in 2006 and it's still good today, and we made this to prove that. And you know what? I can respect that. I think there's something to be said for that sort of creative preservation and not stomping on the original vision or constantly trying to fix it. For the most part, they've presented P3 as it was, just sort of cleaned up and modernized and sort of, you know, more accessible and prettier, subjectively. You know, it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's an active, it's going the route of a remake that wants to preserve the original experience and just make it more accessible. It's not trying to reinvent itself necessarily. And again, if you wanted a reinvention, if you wanted them to take all those ideas and concepts and sort of build a new, more coherent narrative out of them and sort of streamline these things and add a bunch of areas and sort of like do like a Redux sort of like new, like a rebuild of Ava take or something, like this is not that. This is mostly the same game. It's got enough additions and quality of life features to be more accessible, and people who haven't played the original in a long time, like me, are going to get a kick out of it because it's a fresh new coat of paint, and it's interesting to see how they've kept things the same and also where they've deviated in small ways. But for the most part, it doesn't fuck with things, you know. And I think part of that is because, you know, Arena and Arena Ultimax and the Q games exist. Like, they don't want to fuck with canon too badly, so that shit's all incompatible. So there's also that. There's also that aspect to consider. This game does actually have a lot more call forwards to Arena Ultimax that I did appreciate. And also, some of the new events, there's some deep cuts in here. Like Akihiko's adoptive parents are mentioned several times in Reload.
Oh,
they were previously only mentioned in an art book comment and in the drama CD.
Wow.
Yeah, there's some...
that's a pretty cool cut. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some relatively deep cuts here. Like, I think if nothing else, I can say Reload was made with a lot of passion and reverence for the original. And there's also some exchanges, particularly some of the new Strega stuff, alludes to revelations about the nature of personas and shadows and them being essentially one and the same, that was made with P4 and P4 Arena. It kind of, I think someone who starts with this game and then goes back into those games is going to have a slightly better flow in terms of the overall world building than the sort of abrupt change of concept that happened between 3 and 4. So I think that's a neat little, I think the experience has been improved in a ton of small common sense kind of ways. It's very surgical in that way. A lot of small surgical improvements, not massive sprawling overhauls of the game people know. It's essentially the same game, just better, just generally better. I recommend it.
It's an optimization of the old experience rather than a reimagining of it.
Yeah. And I, as someone who likes and respects the original, this is definitely an improved version of that. This is a more stomachable version of, that makes it sound worse than it is. Fuck. Digestible. Sure, why not? More digestible version of that experience. And as from an artistic perspective, I kind of appreciate that they stuck to their guns and just like, no, we're proud of what we made, and we're still proud of what we made, and we're gonna keep it pretty much as it was. And you know what? I respect that. I just sometimes wonder if the people who asked for a remake for so long, if this is necessarily the game they wanted.
Yeah, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but still good though.
But who cares? I don't care about their opinions. I care about my opinions. And my opinion is that it's good. Go buy it. $70 available now. PlayStation Store, Steam, Xbox, Persona on Xbox. Persona on Xbox. We live in a strange time.
Yeah, but not Switch. Fuck you.
Yeah,
we don't want to do that.
Yeah. That's hard. There's so many graphics going on.
Yeah.
Too many graphics.
Yeah, you're gonna get a shitty AI upscale of P3P and you're gonna like it.
Mm-hmm. Eat it, peasant.
Okay.
Maybe when the Switch 2 Electric Boogaloo comes out, we'll port it to that.
Yeah.
And we'll charge $70 again. Mwahahaha. Ha 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 ha.
No, only then will we get the answer.
I mean, according to Midori, the answer is DLC. Apparently, it's coming. It's cooking. They're in the kitchen. What are they doing? That's actually going to be a more interesting thing for me because I'm like, the answer is a very mixed.
Like Chef Boyardee, the devs are truly cooking.
They're in the house like carpet. I'll tell you that much. No, that's actually going to be a very interesting. If they actually do the answer as DLC, like Midori has leaked, and we have every reason to believe her. Midori has been very consistently right about things. That would actually be a more interesting comparison because I wonder if they're going to change anything about that. Because the answer is kind of has a mixed reputation among people. So that would be interesting. I guess I'll see if and when they do that. But for now, Reload. It's good. I like it. I mean, it's they certainly remade Persona 3. I can say that. Kind of a weird note to end on, but yeah, they did.
That Persona 3 really was remade, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They certainly reloaded that. Yeah. Switch to your Persona 3 sidearm. It's faster than Persona 3 reloading. Anyway, that's been my thoughts. Kevin doesn't get any more thoughts because he didn't play it. He's thoughtless. Yeah. He's a thoughtless man. That makes you sound worse than you are. I don't know why.
It really does.
I have this problem of accentuating the negative.
Every single time I talk to this guy, it's always just like no you, and then it's just like something negative, and I'm like, how?
I had that realization. Remember when I first saw Into the Spider-Verse? And immediately after seeing it, I'm like, I just saw Into the Spider-Verse. It was pretty good. Anyway, here's everything I hated about it.
Yeah.
I think it was after that point that I realized I had a problem.
This is an 8 out of 10 movie, but here's why I docked 2 points, and it's just a fucking list.
I think it's just the classic critic problem of it's just easier to talk. It's just easier to talk about what doesn't work than what does. You know,
it's kind of like how I'm lukewarm. It's kind of like how I like Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, but I can only ever really talk about it in the matter of things that I don't like about it.
Yeah, I think it's because positive qualities tend to be more self-evident, whereas negative qualities feel like they need articulation. Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, of course the action in this movie is good. Of course I like Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime. However...
Yeah, so whenever I talk about anything, just assume I probably like it about 10 to 15% more than I'm letting on.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I have the same problem.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a matter of fact of me knowing you for the better part of a decade, and it's just rubbed off on me, but like I do that too.
Yeah, I'm infectious, they say. One day I am a disease. I'm a plague upon both your houses. I've been called that by many a guidance counselor.
Whoa, Zeke freak be upon ye.
I look forward to being able to infect the world one day with my bad opinions. Anyway, that's Reload. We'll see you in the next video, I guess. Zeke freak out. Ciao ciao for now.